Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind, the reunion, season 8. Let's check it out.
Want to make clear, too, about Sarah's reason to say no at the altar with the social issues and everything. I knew coming into this experiment, I definitely have had privilege in my life. And it's something that I wasn't proud of and something I knew I needed to grow. And then coming into this, I knew it was important to Sarah in the pods. And so I want to be vulnerable and be like, hey, I haven't given it much thought. And I'm embarrassed the way that, our conversation had gone at the beginning there.
Okay. Yeah. Two things. One is that, at least so far, and maybe he'll negate it with some sort of horrible thing coming up, but so far, I don't think I could have expected a better opening statement by him. He clearly states that he recognizes that he has privilege, and he recognizes that he needs to learn. He is saying that, at least so far, that Sarah's criticism and the reason why she said no at the altar, that he understands that. He's not coming out of the gate the way that Devin did, where he's saying, hey, can't we all just get along, or can't people be married with differences? He's not leading with that. He might think that, I'm sure he has a lot of thoughts. He went to the altar. He was about to get married. I was under the impression that I think he thought it was going to be a yes, yes. His reaction to getting dumped at the altar was interesting, but people grieve in very different ways, so who knows? So I don't think we could have asked for a better response from him. If he just came out of the gate and said some extremely educated, aware statement, then we would be suspicious, I would anyway, of him memorizing something, or if he did hold those values before, why wasn't he taught? Like, what's going on? So this looks like the way that he's saying it, which is that he was aware of his privilege to some extent, and maybe he had some so this is a well understood phenomenon in my field of psychotherapy and also social justice. These things are linked. And so this goes way back 50, 60, 70 years, maybe longer. I don't know. But it's the notion that for privileged people, and we might even in the United States pinpoint a particular class or overlapping privileged individual in a white Protestant male, white Christian male, heterosexual. That sort of individual has a tremendous amount of privilege, right? Also attractive and seemingly coming from at least a middle-class background. So you are someone that holds so much privilege. And when these individuals are made aware, or it is told to them that either they as an individual or their group has privilege, it can be reacted to by a lot of very good people, well-meaning people, ethical, moral, good, caring, compassionate people. It can be reacted to as, wait, what? And I didn't do anything. What am I being accused of? And it can be told to them in an accusatory, hostile way, which can be unfair, depending, right? On the other hand, with someone his age, he's 28 by this point, 27 while he's filming the show. For someone in, at least the metropolitan area of Minneapolis, which I say that because if you were in the middle of nowhere, but even then, there's the internet, and it's not like people in rural communities don't have access to this information, right? But particularly if you're in a metropolitan area and you're mixing it up with all sorts of people, then you are probably actively avoiding the topic, right? You know that there's this possibility, or you know that you do have privilege, and you're purposely not looking into it. And that to the individual can be seen as, well, I've got a lot of other things to do, and maybe it's not my place because I am a white straight male. Is it really my place to be an expert on this? Can I be an expert on it? And so they'll make up these excuses. Meanwhile, they're coasting on their privileges, right? And it's understandable. I think that we can criticize the practice, and we can look at big groups of people, and we can make those indictments, if you will. But to criticize a specific individual for something that so many people do and is really hard to avoid is dubious. So I don't blame Ben for having this. It seems like he's growing. And the other thing to think about is we don't know if he has harmed or not harmed anybody. That's the key, is that when people have thoughts that are uneducated or not well-rounded or wrong or dismissive or something, racist even, but we're not even necessarily talking about that. We're talking about, does he recognize his place in society? And if he doesn't, then his thoughts are wrong, and therefore he's responsible for all the bad things that have happened in society, or therefore he has harmed people in the past. We can't know that. He might have harmed people in the past. People that have the right thoughts also can harm people in the past. I mean, Harvey Weinstein was, to a lot of people, known for being on the right side of history, advocating for democratic, liberal things. He was outspoken about that. And yet he's one of the most sadistic, psychopathic people on the planet. So I'm using that as an exaggeration. In general, if you are aware, particularly of your privilege, it will, at the very least, give you food for thought and is more likely to result in justice overall, bit by bit. But the way that people talk about people like Ben is to assume that we know that he has harmed people because he doesn't recognize his privilege. And that is just not fair. In the same way that it's wrong-headed to assume that if someone very much recognizes their privilege, that they haven't harmed anybody. So now that isn't to say that these things are possibly correlated on the whole when we look at aggregates of people, large populations. You take one group of 1,000 people who is aware of their privilege and another group of 1,000 people who aren't, and you're probably going to see more harm done as bell curves. But so I just say all that because as a teacher, as a professor, as a person in the society also, but I have a lot of experience talking with clients, supervisees, trainees, talking about having discussions in class about all the various aspects and angles about quote unquote culture, whatever we want to include in that, or of privilege and of oppression and marginalization and dehumanization and harm, racism, sexism, everything. I have seen lately a lot of really wonderful things in that so many people are talking about it, and it's almost mainstream to talk about privilege. And this was not the case 15, 20 years ago. If I brought up privilege among non-therapists or non-aware people, they would say, "What are you talking about?" And if I told a white person that they had privilege, they would have no idea what I was saying, and they would absolutely reject it because they would feel from their perspective that they didn't, So to see a lot of people aware of it is fantastic, but it's so complicated. You have to understand society and systems and history and multiple groups in terms of how they might experience the world and how you experience it. It's like there's so many things you have to absorb in your brain and mix it up and spit out a perspective. It's hard. And one of the simplistic notions that I see as a result of some awareness but not enough awareness is attacking people like Ben without even knowing if he has done good or done bad. You can absolutely criticize him for avoiding the topic of his privilege. It's probable that he has had the opportunity to do so, has known that he should have, and he didn't. You could say that that is a sin of a certain level, or a wrong, or a moral wrong, an ethical wrong on a certain level, but it is not an indictment of harm. He has not actually harmed anyone. We can't know that. Has he participated in systemic harm? Probably. Have you participated in systemic harm? Probably. Have I? I know I have. So he's not unique. He's not the only one. He's not, he's not a viable lightning rod for all of our frustrations. And if we're going to invite privileged people into the fold, we have to be safe. We have to be a safe place for them to come to us. We want them to come to us. And as a therapist, as a professor, I want my students, because most of my students are white. Most of my clients are not white, but most of my students are white. I don't want to push students away, right? I want to bring them into the fold. I want to believe in them. And let's all talk about it. Let's not just attack people, you know what I mean?
I needed to grow. And then coming into this, I knew it was important to Sarah in the pods. And so I want to be vulnerable and be like, hey, I haven't given it much thought. And, I'm embarrassed the way that, our conversation had gone at the beginning there. But then we had great conversations about it. And so there's just a definite impact on me. And I have Sarah to thank for that. And I know it's kind of sad that it took, someone to make me think that way.
Okay. I mean, there's some phrases in there that are kind of interesting. And I'll allow for the absolute possibility that he is bullshitting his way through this, that he knows he has to play the game and he is faking up a storm right now. It's possible. We don't know. We can only go off of what's being said. There's no reason to strongly assume that he is faking it so far, but we'll keep watching.
In the pods, yeah, he may not have thought about things as much as I have, and I don't have all the answers. But I know we're human, and we only evolve with time and by challenging ourselves, and we live and we learn. And it's not necessarily I was looking for a right or wrong answer. I just wanted to have the open discussion.
Yeah, so for her, she's had 12 months to think about how to answer this question or how to talk about what happened. And so she's saying it, and it's hard to know exactly what she's saying. The main thing that she's saying is that, yeah, I didn't hear encouraging things in the pods, but I heard enough to move forward, and he did seem flexible. And so I was willing to move forward to see if I could educate him or help him on his way. She also said, I don't have all the answers myself. Honestly, I can't imagine what it would be like for a white person today to talk about anything in this realm on a reality TV show reunion. Now, I do know in my world, because I live in academia, plenty of white people are very expert in this area and have a ton of wisdom. Just because you're white doesn't mean that you can't have expertise and have heard and absorbed a lot of the voices and a lot of the experiences and a lot of the wisdoms of other groups of people. Because it's not just a black and white thing as well. It's a man and woman thing. It's a cis and trans thing. People with disabilities. It's people who have low socioeconomic status. It's people who have an accent. It's people who have education in their background, people who come from educated families, people who don't have back pain, people who aren't struggling against the health system, people who live in a particular state in our country, or community. Anyway, there are privileges all over the place, and just because one is white doesn't mean that you don't understand oppression. I want to be clear about that. And I don't even know, really, Sarah and Ben's background. They might actually have experienced a ton of oppression. They didn't talk about it, but that doesn't mean they didn't experience it. It's possible they've experienced zero oppression, but, we just can't know. But anyway, so Sarah's response is, basically saying, yeah, I was willing to see what would happen and to engage more in conversation. It seemed like it. But also, I think the main thing is Sarah was just head over heels for him. So she was willing to give it a try and move forward, and might have even not even cared about any downside. I mean, that's why we when we fall in love, it's a part of our brain chemistry to overlook those things.
The problem is out of the pods, it just never progressed. It felt like there was a lack of curiosity from Ben's side.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting to hear. That is the way that it looked. And that second point, is even more important. And I talked about that because Virginia brought that up. I don't know if we heard Sarah say that, but I did wonder if Sarah also had that similar complaint. It's one thing to not know much about it. It's another thing to just act like it's not a big deal and to have no curiosity, no energy around it. At the very least, no energy around it for the sake of someone else's concern, right? That would be the baseline. You would hope that they would also say, well, I've always wanted to think about it, and I've never known where to start, and I have a lot of resistance against it, but I respect you, so maybe I'm wrong-headed because I listen to too many bad podcasts out there, and I'm open. So I think that's interesting. If Ben had done that, I wonder if they'd be married today.
And that bothered me. It just felt like I really didn't know Ben that well, actually.
Sarah just wanted me to ask. She wanted me to bring it up and we could have a candid conversation. And I just wanted to shake Ben during that whole thing and be like, dude, ask the question, be involved. She's easy to talk to. And that's something that I learned about myself through the whole thing.
Okay, again, we don't know if this is him just saying part of the story. It seems genuine, but there could be a lot more to it, if we really heard more of the story. But there isn't any reason to believe that. It could be, but there's no strong evidence of that. And yeah, that's always my hope, is that people, when they have exhibited behavior that was, I don't know do we say it's problematic, what he did? Certainly in my book anyway, not the sort of problematic behavior that we saw like with Micah and Irina laughing at Amber in the pods. That was just straight up sadism. But concerning behavior, embarrassing behavior, we would hope, I always hope, that they would cringe and they would just state that. Like if Hannah, imagine if she had said, oh, when I watch it, I'm just cringing. I'm watching myself and I just want to reach across and say, Hannah, knock that off. That's what Ben is doing. And whether or not he's telling the truth, this is exactly what I am always looking for. It's exactly how I would feel. Even if there wasn't anything that I did bad, I would still be going, what are you doing with your hands? Stop talking with your hands so much. And why is your hair like that? Jiminy Cricket. And especially if I'd done something that warranted actual criticism, I'd be like, oh my God, stop it. So he's having the exact reaction. And it's so interesting how some of the most problematic people are the most unlikely people to say anything. They'll double down, like Stephen at the reunion when he was caught cheating, right? That he just doubles down on it. He's like, lies more. And all he had to say, even if he didn't believe it, would be, yeah, when I watch it, I think, Stephen, you clearly have some kind of problem with sex stuff. I don't know. Monica's a good person. She didn't deserve that. And I just think, what are you I thought it at the time, and I'm watching it now. I'm like, oh my God, like I need to go to therapy for I don't know I have a history, and then, okay. Doesn't mean that all is forgotten or forgiven, but at the very least, it's like, okay, well, then you're on our side. We agree. That's embarrassing. Ben is, saying that. So it's commendable. 2 thumbs up, really. Because there's a lot of things he could, 2 thumbs up compared to other people at the reunion. How about that?
Yeah, one of the issues that came up was the issue of gay marriage. And there was a particular time in your time together where you said you couldn't remember your church's stance on gay marriage. Was that true? You simply couldn't remember? Or was it maybe that you just didn't?
People ridicule the hosts, which I think is, in my opinion, completely unfair. The thing that I would say to anyone who would criticize them is, how about you give it a try? Because that is not an easy job. And the amount of bullying that they probably get for just their outfits alone. So whenever I see, I'll comment if they do something that I think is a problem, like when, I can't remember their names, Nick and Vanessa, when Vanessa was asking someone about, are we going to see kids, to someone seasons ago. It wasn't horrible. There are a lot of aunties that will say that kind of thing, and I'm not going to throw ante's out the window for that, but it presumes that people are going to have kids too. You don't know what someone's going through, and it's not this universal kind of nice conversation for everybody. Anyway, you can certainly have it if it's a friend and you're having a back and forth. There's some safety to talk about it. But on stage, just blasting, and the person being asked the question, from my memory, was sort of like, what is... Anyway, yeah, I'll point it out. But when they point out, when they do something well, I'll point it out too. It's a great question. Well said, concise, better than I could do. Some people even say that I should host this. I would be horrible compared to them. I would be freaking out, and my brain wouldn't work. Plus, I'm not concise. The whole thing would be me yammering the whole time. Everyone would be asleep.
Because there wasn't really anyone in my life that it really pertained to, and it wasn't something on my head, and I'm not proud of it. It's something that I was, as I grow older, I knew I needed to grow into. And so that's probably why, and I try to go to church every weekend, don't go every weekend. So, the sermon that Sarah watched, I don't remember because maybe I wasn't there, or maybe it just didn't, hit home to me because it.
That's sus, right? With how much, it's possible. I can't know. There's a lot of different experiences. He might, so if he is telling the truth, then he is an anomaly of an individual who hasn't been provoked to think about this, because he's saying it never really came up in his life, which is possible. So if he's telling the truth, then he's, one, a very strange anomaly, but two, it wouldn't exonerate him from having an answer. Plus, he should have known when asked about it, if these things were true and if this was true, for him to say, and it is kind of weird, Sarah, by the way, that I don't know what my church's stance. I know that, isn't that weird? Maybe I actually haven't been paying attention, or my church doesn't talk about it very much, or they talk vague, or I don't understand, or I'm avoiding it. I don't know. But you're right to ask, and you're right to, I don't know if you're thinking it's weird that I don't know, but it's weird. But the way he would answer would be like, yeah, I don't know. Like, he was asked, what's your church's opinion about whales or something? And I don't know. I don't know if they've ever talked about whales before, or dolphins. Why do you ask? An American Christian that goes to church all the time, again, if it hadn't come up, then it would be notable, and he should have some awareness and say, yeah, that's weird. But so it's sus the whole way. Now, so if he's telling the truth, then there's that. I don't think he's telling the truth. I don't think he's telling the whole truth anyway. I am suspicious of this whole thing. Now, maybe he'll clarify and he'll say something like, yeah, I know, it's weird. And he's saying it's embarrassing, and maybe he'll say, and by the way, I am absolutely supportive of LGBTQ people and of their lives and to be themselves, and I will advocate for their safety and their rights to be themselves and to get married, and I acknowledge that they are unfairly discriminated against and attacked. Maybe he'll say something like that. But here's my suspicion, which is not uncommon, is the thing. And we wouldn't look at Ben and think, what a weirdo. We could certainly criticize him and all the other people that are like this, who were brainwashed, is one way of putting it, but there's always a choice. Anyway, that in all likelihood, he had heard enough in church that indicated that the church that he was in was not supportive of LGBTQ people. And he started to, as a teenager, he's online or he's at school or whatever, and he just learned that it's best not to get into it. And, and I could see actually a generation of privileged Christians in our country, and maybe particularly white Christians, because they do have some awareness that they have privilege and they have to watch out for that for good reason, and maybe some bad ones, meaning that they're unfairly attacked just because they have privilege, that kind of thing, that they would learn, if I if I'm going to be in this church, if I'm going to be a Christian, I have to learn how to respond to these kind of questions in certain contexts. And I wouldn't be surprised if it worked for him in previous contexts, or he thought it worked when he said, yeah, I just, because he seemed to have a pretty good way of deflecting, because it looked confidently stated, but from our perspective, or mine anyway, and I think from Sarah's, it's just like, what? Now, in other contexts, they might have also thought that, but then they just moved on in life because they weren't really in that position, and they didn't have the ability to rewind it and evaluate it, and they weren't planning on marrying him, that kind of thing. So I'm going to take a guess and say that it's something like that. And now that he's at the reunion, he's given it some more thought, and he knows that he did that, and he also is not actually, at the very least, as much pro-LGBTQ people as he thinks we would want him to be, and he's probably right about that. He's basically doing another version of this, right? He's basically doing another version of, I didn't know, and I don't know, and I wouldn't know, and how would I know? And now that's embarrassing, and maybe I need to educate myself. So given what we saw, maybe this is like, again, although given what he said earlier that I could have hoped he would have said, that I could maybe imagine, would be that he would say, yeah, I actually did kind of know what my church's opinion was, but to tell you the truth, and I've thought about it a lot over the past year, to tell you the truth, it is a bit jumbled, but I just didn't want to get into it. And I don't know what to think personally, because I've been told by a lot of people that I love and respect that it's not okay to be gay. But I also know gay people and think, and I'm not gay, I'm hetero, so I've never had to personally face it. So I've just avoided the whole thing, and that's wrong. It's like just not helping the situation, but that's kind of where I'm at, and I don't know what to do with that. And I don't appreciate, if my church is wrong, or if the people that I respect are wrong, I don't know what to do with that. Something like that, we can't imagine that happening, but maybe something in that direction, I don't know.
And so, the sermon that Sarah watched, I don't remember because maybe I wasn't there, or maybe it just didn't, hit home to me because it wasn't something that was in my life at the time, or whatever it may be.
Another thing that you don't remember, Ben, is the girl you dated on TikTok.
Mm-hmm. You chose in that moment to believe Ben.
Yeah.
But making it clear that if he was lying, that the trust was...
Interesting. Yeah. Sometimes they avoid these kinds of things. I'm guessing they're going to avoid things this season. I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent here and tell you what I hope they get into. You've probably already watched it, so you know if they do. So I hope they've already gone over Devin and Virginia. Did they get into everything that I wished they would have? No, they didn't. I mean, maybe they'll bring out Brittany and they'll talk about that. I mean, they're not shying away from LGBTQ topics, so maybe they'll bring up Brittany. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they ask Devin what was going on there with you. But they also could think, well, he basically got it from Virginia already, because she very firmly implied that he is not pro-LGBTQ people. So with Joey and Monica, what would I hope they would get in? No, there was nothing on the show that really required, maybe Joey's lack of affection. I don't know. Dave and Lauren, that's a gold mine right there of things to ask about. So yeah, maybe they'll bring out the jabroni in question. They'll ask Dave, and I'm guessing he's up to talk about it, about why were you so childishly jealous of her having dated someone just before the pods? What's wrong with you? You asked everyone what's wrong with them. Why did you do that in the pods? Also, yeah, so there's that. And then what's going on with your sister? Is she that? Maybe, hopefully they'll bring out the sister. I don't know. Alex and Madison, well, they're not going to ask Alex about those allegations. I'm going to assume that, and I don't blame them. There could be lawsuits, really significant lawsuits from all parties, actually, from victims and from Alex, if they were to even bring that up. There could be So I would assume they're not going to get into Alex's allegations. Madison, I'm sure that's a gold mine as well. They are going to review maybe what I was calling putting the screws to Mason, and the way it looked, which I don't necessarily think it was, that Madison was spoiling it for Meg, that Madison was manipulating Meg to not want to be with Mason or something. I don't know. Wait, is Mason and Madison, maybe they're still together? That'd be interesting. Yeah, I'm guessing the Alex and Madison thing is going to get real ugly because Madison, she has signs of someone that rewrites history in her past relationships to be like extremely negative and betraying and sadistic and psychopathic. So I'm going to take a guess and say she's going to come after Alex and maybe Mason. I don't know. But I could also see her having a lot of differentiation, and maybe she deserves to come after people. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Mason, he's not going to come out of the gate with anything because he seems to fall on his sword even when he doesn't need to. And then Molly, I don't think she has any bones to pick. She already did everything. So, yeah, anyway. All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.